I want to, again, Copa Combate MMA on November 11th. It's going to be a huge event, a big tournament. Combate Americas is behind it. Telemundo, Deportes, and Telemundo's involved. English, Spanish, everything's going on with this thing and all. Campbell, I want to ask you this part of it. You have a man by the name of Alberto Del Rio, WWE alum. He is now Alberto El Patron in Impact Wrestling, and he's been involved in Combate Americas, the company. How did you get involved with Alberto, and what do you think of Alberto? Because obviously he's older now. What do you think of Alberto if he would have been in his prime? Because he was an MMA fighter back in the day, a while ago, how he could have done.
Well, you know what? If you ever want a job besides what you're doing, you should call me because I think you'd work very well at Combate, right? You think like we think. You really do. You'd be great doing strategy for us. Alberto, I met him because I wanted him to fight 3-4 years ago. I wanted him to fight in Combate because he'd done, when was he in Pride? He was in Pride about 10 years ago, right?
Yes.
When I was talking to him, he was about 6 or 7 years out of Pride. And he fought Crow Cop. You know, he was a great fighter and obviously has a very esteemed wrestling background in Mexico. His father is Dos Caras, right? Very famous luchador, masked wrestler. So he had a great tradition as a wrestler, which means he's got some showmanship, yo. I think one of the biggest problems with a lot of MMA fighters is they lack a sense of showmanship. It's okay to put on a show. Conor McGregor gets it, right? John Castaneda and Marcelo Rojo, for us, they get it. Eric Goyito Perez gets it, right? Put on a show, and I like that about Alberto. Also, he was a tough guy. He was a Pan-American wrestling champion, and he fought in MMA. So he was perfect for me. I offered him $1 million to fight for us, which is a lot for a new organization, right? And I got his attention. And that's how we became friends. He decided not to fight. And then we ended up using him as a TV commentator because he's a great commentator. We also use him a lot as a spokesperson. And I don't know if you know this, Jim, I don't know if you know this about Alberto, but he is a very charitable guy. And, you know, I'm sorry, we had another call come on. He's a very charitable guy, and we do a lot with him on the charities. He works with an orphanage in Mexico. Jim, Alberto just walked in. I'm glad I wasn't saying, what a piece of crap that Alberto. Say hi to Jim from the Miami area.
Jim, how are you, amigo?
Hey, good, thank you, sir. We were just wrapping up our interview, but I had to ask him about you. I just think what you've done, obviously, with pro wrestling is phenomenal. Your family, Dos Caras, everything that's going on. But as a professional, a businessman, and he was telling me something about your charity as well now. I just think it's a great thing. And just, you're a great person. And I think there's some misnomers out there about you at times. But hey, you're a passionate man. And with passion, sometimes comes a little controversy.
There you go, man.
Alberto is first and foremost a gentleman, and that's for real. He's also big. All right, Jim, listen, man, it was great to talk to you. We didn't have to at any of our events. And, you know a lot about the sport, and I appreciate talking to someone that knows a lot about our sport because I love this sport.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Again, wanted to say, Combate Americas, this organization has taken off. CEO Campbell McLaren. You have Copa Combate MMA coming up on November 11th. This is a big one-night tournament. It's just going to be a fascinating event. Campbell, I'm going to leave you with this one, though. You mentioned Conor McGregor, so I'm glad you talked a little bit about him. But I want to ask you about this. Caroline's Comedy Club. What do you remember about those days? And are you familiar with Richie Minervini?
Yeah, of course I remember Richie Minervini. You know, Caroline's Comedy Club. So that was the #1 comedy club in the world, right? When I went over there, I mean, I was putting in Jerry Seinfeld, Howie Mandel, Jay Leno. I mean, it was a golden age of stand-up comedy. And Richie represented a group of people. There's something wrong with Long Island. You had folks like Richie and Billy Crystal and Bob Nelson. And there was just something twisted about the water in Long Island because it created a whole crop of great comedians. So, yes, of course I remember Richie. Why do you ask about that?
I just did because I saw that in the bio about your background there. And it's funny because his brother Craig is a famous broadcaster and he's working down here. And Florida Marlins, the Miami Marlins now, the Florida Panthers. He does their broadcasts. And I've known Craig, who was Craig DeGeorge back in the early days coming out of Syracuse. The commentator Craig DeGeorge of WWF at the time, way back when. So Craig and myself, we forged a friendship. And then I didn't know anything about Richie. And he told me about Richie, his brother. And it was just interesting. But when I saw that, Caroline's and New York, I said, oh boy, I got my offbeat question. I have to ask Campbell about Caroline's and then also about Richie.
Listen, stand-up comedy was a good training ground for MMA, right? And if you think about it, the comedians all use very violent language. I killed, I bombed, I destroyed. And it's not a team sport. Stand-up in MMA is not a team sport. You go out there, you put yourself on the line, it's just you and them. And there's no one to blame it on if it doesn't work except for you. So, it's an interesting question. You bring up a bunch of memories. And, that's even before the UFC, So, those are interesting days.
And that's an interesting analogy, and thank you for that. And, Campbell, is there anything you want to just say about Copa Combate to wrap it up? I know I've been prefacing Telemundo, but obviously you talked about the English-speaking part of this as well.
Yeah, it's great to be on NBC Sports Network. Obviously, MMA fans know that network from other organizations they broadcast. It's great. We have aimed everything at Hispanic fans, first and foremost, I have to say. But if you are Spanishly challenged, and my Spanish isn't good, you'll really enjoy watching on NBC Sports Network. We've got a great commentary team over there. Gil Melendez is sitting in, of course, Juliana Pena, and Beto, who's been with us since pretty much the beginning. So JP and Gil, UFC stalwarts, are going to be handling the English commentary on NBCSN.
Well, Campbell McLaren, thank you so much for taking the time with this. And I'll tell you what, if you're ever in San Antonio, there's a good Spanish-Mexican restaurant there that you need to check out. You can ask Alberto about it. He knows about it very good. The Volcanos, I believe is how you say it. I hope I'm saying it right. It's something to try as well. So thank you so much.
Hey, listen, come December 1. We're in San Antonio. Come.
Yes.
December 1 is Kira Matara versus Paulina Granados.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
You should come out. We'll go together.
Oh, thank you so much, Campbell. I appreciate it very much. And thank you for the time in doing this.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
All right. Bye, everybody.